Jonathan Harkis Genre, 29th September, and Train to London, Chapter 17, Part 3. When I received Mr. Billingston's courteous message that he would give me any information in his power, I thought it best to go down to Whitby and make on the spot such inquiries as I wanted. It was now my object to trace that horrid cargo of the Count's to its place in London. Later we may be able to deal with it. Billington Jr., a nice lad, met me at the station and brought me to his father's house, where they had decided that I must stay the night. Their hospital, with true Yorkshire hospitality, give a guest everything and leave him free to do as he likes. They all knew that I was busy and that my stay was short, and Mr. Billington had ready in his office all the papers concerning the consignment of boxes. It gave me almost a turn to see again one of the letters which I had seen on the Count's table before I knew of his diabolical plans. Everything had been carefully thought out and done systematically, and with precision. He seemed to have been prepared for every obstacle which might be placed by accident in the way of his intentions being carried out. To use an Americanism, he had taken no chances, and the absolute accuracy with which his instructions were fulfilled was simply the logical result of his cares. I saw the invoice and took note of him. 50 cases of common earth to be used for experimental purposes. Also the copy of letter to Carter Patterson and their reply. Of both of these I got copies. This was all the information Mr. Billington could give me. So I went down to the port and saw the coast guards, the customs officers, and the harbour master. They had all something to say of the strange entry of the ship, which is already taking its place in local tradition, but no one could add to the simple description 50 cases of common earth. I then saw the station master, who kindly put me in communication with the man who had actually received the boxes. Their tally was exact with the list, and they had nothing to add, except that the boxes were main and mortal heavy, and that shifting them was dry work. One of them added that it was hard lines, that there wasn't any gentleman, such like as yourself, Squire, to show some sort of appreciation of their efforts in a liquid form. Another put in rather that the thirst then generated was such that even the time which had elapsed had not completely allayed it. Needless to add, I took care before leaving to lift forever and adequately this source of reproach. 30th September. The station master was good enough to give me a line to his old companion, the station master at King's Cross, so that when I arrived there in the morning I was able to ask him about the arrival of the boxes. He too put me at once in communication with the proper officials, and I saw that the tally was correct with the original invoice. The opportunities of acquiring an abnormal thirst had been here limited. A noble use of them had, however, been made, and again I was compelled to deal with the result in an ex post facto manner. From thence I went on to Carter Patterson's central office, where I met with the utmost courtesy. They looked up the transaction in the day book and letter book and at once telephoned to the King's Cross office for more details. By good fortune, the man who did the teaming were waiting for word, and the official at once sent them over, sending also by one of them the waybill and all the papers connected with the delivery of the boxes at Carfax. Here again I found the tally agreeing exactly. The carriers men were able to supplement the paucity of the written words with a few details. These were, I shortly found, connected almost solidly with the dusty nature of the job, and of the consequent thirst engendered in the operators. On my affording an opportunity through the medium of the currency of the realm of the allaying at a later period this beneficent evil, one of the men remarked, "That ear as governor is the rummiest I ever was in, blimey. But it ain't been touched since 100 years. There was dust that thick in the place that you might have slept on it without hurting of your bones, and the place was there neglected that yet might have smelled of old Jerusalem in it. But the old chapel that took the psych, that did me and my mate, we thought we would never get out quick enough. Lord, I wouldn't take less nor a queer moment to stay there or to dark." Having been in the house, I could well believe him. But if he knew what I knew, he would, I think, have raised his terms. Of one thing I'm now satisfied, that all the boxes which arrived at Whitby from Varna in the Demeter were safely deposited in the old chapel of Carfax. There should be 50 of them there, unless any have since been removed, as from Dr. Seward's diary, I fear. I should try to see the carter who took away the boxes from Carfax when Renfield attacked them. By following up this clue we may learn a good deal. Later, Mina and I have worked all day, and we have put all the papers into order. Mina Hakasson, 30th September. I am so glad that I hardly know how to contain myself. It is, I suppose, the reaction from the haunting fear which I've had, that this terrible affair and the reopening of his old wound might act detrimentally on Jonathan. I saw him leave for Whitby with as brave a face as I could, but I was sick with apprehension. The effort has, however, done him good. He was never so resolute, never so strong, never so full of volcanic energy as at present. It is just as that dear, good Professor Van Helsing said, he is true grit, and he approves under strain that would kill a weaker nature. He came back full of life and hope and determination. We've got everything in order for tonight. I feel myself quite wild with excitement. I suppose one ought to pity anything so haunted as is the Count. That is just it. The thing is not human, not even beast. To read Dr. Seward's account of poor Lucy's death and what followed is enough to dry up the springs of pity in one's heart. Later, Lord Godalming and Mr. Morris arrived earlier than we expected. Dr. Seward was out on business and had taken Jonathan with him, so I had to see them. It was to me a painful meeting, for it brought back all poor dear Lucy's hopes of only a few months ago. Of course, they had heard Lucy speak of me, and it seemed that Dr. Van Helsing, too, had been quite blowing my trumpet, as Mr. Morris expressed it. Poor fellows, neither of them is aware that I know all about the proposals they made to Lucy. They did not quite know what to say or do, as they were ignorant of the amount of my knowledge. So they had to keep on neutral subjects. However, I thought the matter over and came to the conclusion that the best thing I could do would be to post them in affairs right up to date. I knew from Dr. Seward's diary that they had been at Lucy's death, her real death, and that I need not fear to betray any secret before the time. So I told them as well as I could that I had read all the papers and diaries, and that my husband and I, having typewritten them, had just finished putting them in order. I gave them each a copy to read in the library. When Lord Godalming got his and turned it over, "It does make a pretty good pile," he said. "Did you write all this, Mrs. Harker?" I nodded, and he went on. "I don't quite see the drift of it, but you people are all so good and kind, and have been working so earnestly and so energetically, that all I can do is to accept your ideas blindfold and try to help you. I have had one lesson already in accepting facts that should make a man humble to the last hour of his life. Besides, I know you laughed, my poor Lucy." Here he turned away, uncovered his face with his hands. I could hear the tears in his voice. Mr. Morris, with instinctive delicacy, just laid a hand for a moment on his shoulder, and then walked quietly out of the room. I suppose there is something in women's nature that makes a man free to break down before her and express his feelings on the tender or emotional side without feeling it derogatory to his manhood. For when Lord Godalming found himself alone with me, he sat down on the sofa and gave way utterly and openly. I sat down beside him and took his hand. I hope he didn't think it forward of me, and that if he ever thinks of it afterwards, he never will have such a thought. There I wrong him. I knew he never will. He is too true a gentleman. I said to him, for I could see that his heart was breaking, "I loved dear Lucy, and I know what she was to you, and what you were to her. She and I were like sisters, and now she's gone. Will you not let me be like a sister to you in your trouble? I know what sorrows you've had, though I cannot measure the depth of them. If sympathy and pity can help in your affliction, won't you let me be of some little service for Lucy's sake?" In an instant the poor dear fellow was overwhelmed with grief. It seemed to me that all that he had of late been suffering in silence found a vent at once. He grew quite hysterical, and raising his open hands, beat his palms together in a perfect agony of grief. He stood up and then sat down again, and the tears rained down his cheeks. I felt an infinite pity for him, and opened my arms unthinkingly. With a sob he laid his head on my shoulder and cried like a weary child, whilst he shook with emotion. We women have something of the mother in us that makes us rise above smaller matters when the mother spirit is invoked. I felt this big, sorrowing man's head resting on me, as though it were that of the baby that some day may lie on my bosom. And I stroked his hair as though he were my own child. I never thought at the time how strange it all was. After a little bit his sobs ceased, and he raised himself with an apology, though he made no disguise of his emotion. He told me that 4 days and nights past, weary days and sleepless, must speak in his time of sorrow. There was no woman whose sympathy could be given to him, or with whom, owing to the terrible circumstances with which his sorrow was surrounded, he could speak freely. "I know now how I suffered," he said, as he dried his eyes. but I do not know when yet. Do not know even yet, and none other can ever know how much your sweet sympathy has been to me today. I shall know better in time, and believe me that, though I'm not ungrateful now, my gratitude will grow with my understanding. You will let me be like a brother. Will you not, for all our lives? For dear Lucy's sake? For dear Lucy's sake, I said as we clasped hands. Aye, and for your own sake. He added, for if a man's esteem and gratitude are ever worth the winning, you have won mine today. If ever the future should bring to you a time when you need a man's help, believe me, you will not call in vain. God grant that no such time may ever come to you to break the sunshine of your life. But if it should ever come, promise me that you will let me know. He was so earnest, and his sorrow was so fresh, that I felt it would comfort him. So I said, I promise. As I came along the corridor, I saw Mr. Morris looking out of the window. He turned as he heard my footsteps. How's art? He said. Then noticing my red eyes, he went on. Oh, I see you've been comforting him. Poor old fellow, he needs it. No one but a woman can help a man when he's in trouble of the heart, and he had no one to comfort him. He bore his own trouble so bravely that my heart bled for him. Saw the manuscript in his hands, and I knew that when he read it, he would realize how much I knew. So I said to him, I wish I could comfort all who suffer from the heart. Will you let me be your friend, and will you come to me for her comfort if you need it? You will know later on why I speak. He saw that I was in earnest, and stooping, took my hand and raising it to his lips, kissed it. It seemed but poor comfort to so brave and unselfish a soul, and impulsively I bent over and kissed him. The tears rose in his eyes, and there was a momentary choking in his throat. He said quite calmly, Little girl, you will never regret that true-hearted kindness so long as ever you live. Then he went into the study to his friend. Little girl, the very words he had used to Lucy, and oh, but he proved himself a friend. This is the end of chapter 17. I will be happy to see you back in chapter 18. Now, go off, bathe in the sun, and have some fun. Goodbye.